Hi, I'm Christine Gritmon from Christine Gritmon Inc., and you are listening to the Social Media Talks podcast with Alan Hennessy from compassmedia.ie.
Welcome to Social Media Talks podcasts, brought to you by compassmedia.ie.
Hello and thank you for joining me. This is the Social Media Talks podcast, brought to you by compassmedia.ie, episode number 96. I'm your host, Alan Hennessy, and this is the podcast to help business owners who want to learn more about social media marketing. And we are delighted to launch our season 2 of the podcast. And we have some fantastic guests lined up over the next couple of weeks. So well worth tuning into every week and subscribing to it as well. And we're looking forward to today's show. Today I'm going to be joined by Christine Gritmon. And Christine Gritmon empowers small business owners and solo entrepreneurs to tell their story on social media. She has spoken on stages worldwide and is a frequent expert guest on podcasts, live streams, Twitter chats, blog posts, as well as hosting her own weekly live show and her own weekly live Twitter chat as well. And today we're going to be talking to Christine all about personal branding. So looking forward to this conversation. So without further ado, I think we will transition straight over to the interview with Christine. Hi Christine, how are you? Thanks for joining us today on the Social Media Talks podcast. It's a pleasure to have your company, and we are delighted because this is season 2, episode 1. This is just going to be great. I'm looking forward to talking to you all about personal branding. How are you today?
I'm doing very well, Alan. How are you?
I'm brilliant. It's great to, as I said, have you on. We've been sort of bumping into each other online over the last number of years, and we've never actually got to sit down and chat. So, looking forward to talking to you today. So, I suppose before we start, just for people who don't know you, which I find very hard to believe, but maybe you might give us a little bit of background on yourself first.
Sure, absolutely. Well, I'm Christine Gritmon, Gritmon, grit like gritty, mon like Monday. And I'm actually the only Christine Gritmon, which is interesting. So if you look up Christine Gritmon, it's definitely me. And this social media is actually my 4th career, because it didn't exist when I was, in school or coming out of school. And I find that's true for a lot of people in social media, which is pretty interesting. We are able to get in sort of early, and now there's people graduating from school with degrees in social media, but that was certainly not a thing when I got started or when you get started. So it's very interesting. I got in at the right time to social media, and it's only been a few years now. So I feel very fortunate to have sort of landed in the social media sphere when I did.
Yeah, and I think that's I can remember back when we used to have MySpace, and so we were back at the early days of I suppose the integration of social media into the world. And I think anyone that's coming out of sort of college now is sort of, as you say, has all these degrees, and they're saying, yeah, we'll do this and we'll do this. But I do believe that we sort of started out at the right time, because I think we've all sort of grown with social, and I think that's very important as well.
Yeah, it's also very important to have learned sort of some fundamentals of marketing and to have some context for marketing pre-social media, because of course you hear the cliche of companies saying, oh, well, we'll just have the intern do it. They're young, they know how to do social media. And having used it personally versus understanding marketing and understanding it as a marketing tool, they're very, very different skills. I actually studied film when I was in school, and one of the things that frustrated me was that we had to learn on these super old cameras that nobody really uses anymore. We had to learn how to adjust all these things, and it was just very, very low tech. And now I know that the reason they started us out learning on that is because you still need to keep those same principles of lighting and framing and, focus and all of those things in mind. And it's too easy to skip all of that when you've got sort of that silver bullet digital tool. So I do understand why they started us out on the low tech stuff. And I feel like I'm grateful to have started out in marketing related things before social media was a factor, because it is too easy for the tool to become the message. And what it really is that the tool should be in service to the message.
I would totally agree with you on that. I think it's so important. You know, it's like, I remember, as similar to yourself, when I started DJing, we were using record decks, and then all of a sudden there was CDs, and then all of a sudden everything went digital, and people started
just push a button,
pushing buttons. But the whole art of DJing went out the window because of this, you know. And don't get me wrong, I'm not saying that it wasn't a good thing. It is a progression, but I do think, as you say, being able to do it in its raw format is so much of an advantage to anybody. And I think, you know, we see that every day. And, you know, like, we would often get clients and say, oh, well, I have, as you say, I have the intern do it, or I'll have my daughter's great on social media. And so, yeah, but can they actually put a proper strategy together? Probably not. And you know that they're going to come back to you in 6 months' time saying, help. Well, you know, I think.
Yes. Just last week, I saw on a Facebook group for business owners locally, someone was saying, oh, does anyone know a good social media strategist who can help me do this at a better level? And someone said, oh, just find a preteen, just find a tween and teach and, you know, get them on board. And a whole bunch of us commented like, no, that's you're not going to get strategy as a marketing tool that way. She said, well, I'm training my 9-year-old, you know, it's the new mowing the lawn. I'm like, no, it's not. It's a skill. Yeah,
no, and I would agree. Like, I do see there is advantages to having the teens on a social media team, because they're probably, you know, they're moving a lot quicker and they're seeing what the trends are happening. But I don't think, as a business owner, that, you know, you wouldn't let your 9-year-old or your 10-year-old open up your store, you know, and sort of run it for the day. So, you know,
I will say one big advantage that so-called digital natives, you know, the younger generations who have never known anything but digital, one advantage that they do have is a lack of intimidation. So one of the things I teach small business owners how to do their own social media better. And I also work with professionals of all sorts on their personal branding. And one common theme on all of it is that people are just intimidated. People are intimidated by the tools. People are intimidated that they're going to do something wrong or say something wrong. And so they just don't even try. And so much of it is a mental game. I like to say that my job is part therapist, because so much of what I do is just getting people out of their own way, getting people out of their own heads. And that's an advantage that kind of very confident young people maybe have online, which is that they say, oh, we've got this. Oh, we know how to do this. And they sort of laugh at the older folks who aren't even necessarily all that much older. I've worked with people who are, you know, 30, which is pretty digitally native, and, you know, they just don't necessarily know how to use it for business. But people who, people who aren't intimidated by the tools just think it's so funny. But so much of it is that, and so much of it is learning that it's not something to be scared of, and it actually doesn't have to be that hard. It's just a matter of getting started and getting comfortable and trying.
Yeah, and I think that's a very important part. Is like it's embracing it. You know, and I mean, I've worked I've thought hundreds of people, and they've all come back and they've all said, you know, oh, it's not actually as daunting as what I thought it was going to be.
Yep.
It's because, and I think as well as that, that's a lot down to helping them to know where their level is. And being able to say, okay, you know, because I think one of the huge, I suppose, turning points for me, and especially when I was starting training, is understanding that, you know, people have a different level, and when you can get to them and you can actually start teaching them and letting them know that it's not as a big, you know, social media giant that you're going to go, oh, I have to be everywhere. That when you just say, no, look, start here and do this, this, and this will get you to the next stage. And I've seen it before where people have gotten comfortable with what they're doing, and then they just start, you see them elevating onto the next level. And that's one of my biggest joys, is when I'm training, that I go, well, I had a hand in that. And I think that's really, really a great thing to have as well.
Absolutely. And people practically cry with joy when I tell them that, when I basically give them permission to not be someplace. I had a client who was intimidated by social media in general, as many of my clients often are, but she has fallen in love with Instagram. She has really come to enjoy it as a creative expression. She still feels more comfortable sort of batch creating and planning it. She's not someone who's just going to hop on and share her life. She still likes it very controlled, but she really has come to love it as a means of expressing her aesthetic. However, she despises Facebook. She begged me to not have her on Facebook. And what we did is I said, unfortunately, in her line of work, she needs to at least, technically maintain some degree of presence there. But I set it up so that it's as passive as possible to still be effective. So I set it up so that when someone messages her, it redirects them to contact her via another way. So it says straight up that they should call or email. And then if they message her anyway, it says, thanks so much for your message. For a better response, please, and it gives the phone number and the email address. And it also says it right on her profile. And we've just made it as easy as possible to take things off of Facebook when someone finds her there, and to redirect them to contact her directly, or to find her on Instagram or Pinterest, which is where she's much, much more comfortable. So she was really happy that I was able to make that work for her, so she didn't have to do the thing that she was most upset by. And she's still able to put it to work for her. She still gets clients who find her via Facebook, but then they're able to pursue her in ways that actually show her off much better.
Yeah, and I think that's very important. Is that and as well as that, it also makes it like it's like everything. There's a famous piece that where people say, oh, I have to journal every day, and they say, okay, so it becomes a job. Well, but when you say, I'm the person that journals every day, it changes the whole dynamic of the conversation. And I think that's the same with social media, because if business owners enjoy the actual the whole experience of doing social media for their own business, I think it gives them a much better edge, because then they also become a lot more creative in what they're doing as well.
Yes, and it shows them off much better too, because if you feel like you're someplace because you have to be, you're not going to show up the same way. You're not going to show up with your full personality. You're not going to show up in a way that's comfortable. You're not going to be showing yourself off in your best light. I sort of compare it to back when I was younger and in my corporate days. I worked for a big corporation, and the big line everyone's heard is dress for the job you want, not the job you had. And the implication there in this case was wear a suit. Wear the most expensive suit that you can afford, really take care with that. And I always thought, but the job I want doesn't involve wearing a suit.
Yeah.
And so when I was, in that position where I was dressing for the job that they thought I was supposed to want, I've got to tell you, I did not have any personal style to my suit. I just had, the jacket on the back of the door that I technically needed to wear to meetings. And, I didn't take as much care with making sure that it represented me. But now when I go to a conference or something, when I speak on stage and I'm dressing as myself, I still happen to be one of those people who dresses up for the stage. I know a lot of my friends, actively will never dress up for the stage because they want to assert their independence, and that's not on brand for them to be dressed up. But the fact is, even if I'm dressed up on a stage, I'm dressed up as me. It's a very different vibe than if I were wearing something because I felt like I was supposed to. And that's how we show up online too. Are you in a costume? Are you in a costume of what you believe is expected of you? And is that how you're showing up online? Or are you showing up as your full self in a place where you're comfortable?
Yeah. Yeah, and it's so true. It's so true. And people see that and they understand that and they say it like that, so I think, as you say, it's showing up and being, I suppose, your authentic self as well, because people see that. And that's the one thing I find about social media. You can't hide in social media. You can to a certain degree, but you can hide. People will figure you out very, very quickly. So being you is the best of what you can be, I think. It's so important.
And that also brings forward sort of one of the most important principles, I think, of figuring out how to show up as yourself online, which is a lot of times the parts of ourselves that we feel that we should hide or suppress in order to fit in and seem, quote unquote professional are actually the very things that we should be embracing and sharing and showing up as in order to stand out. What makes you fit in will never be what makes you stand out. And on social media, you see all these, influencers and all these people, who are doing the same makeup and saying the same things and wearing the same clothes and posting the same pictures and asking the same questions for engagement and all of that. And that's never what's going to be what makes them stand out, because who can tell if it's their post or someone else's post in the feed? If you are really showing up as yourself and you are really standing in your personal brand and your personal self, it will be clear to people whose post it is. It will be clear whose voice it is. It will be clear whose image it is, because there's no way it could possibly be anyone else.
And I think that brings us, I suppose I was going to say it brings us nicely around to personal branding, but I think we've been talking about it for the last, 50 and odd minutes. But I think, it's very important. What would be your big tips for people who are getting their personal brand in place, and especially now in 2021 where we're starting on a brand new, sheet, and we can start to look at that. If they're doing that, what would be your tips for that?
One big thing is that your personal brand is not something that you create, it's something that you uncover. It's not a matter of sort of focus grouping it and, doing market research and saying, who should I be? Instead, it's a matter of saying, who am I? What can I maintain? What can I what's already there that I can just sort of bump up to 11? It's okay to be an exaggerated version. Like that's okay. That's acceptable. But it has to be a version of what's already there. Otherwise, first of all, people are going to see through it. But second of all, you're creating so much extra work for yourself. If you're just playing the part of your actual self, you're going to be able to maintain that. It's not going to feel like a whole extra job. You're just being you. In fact, you're taking the job off of your plate of having to suppress that and hide things. It makes everything so much easier, and it also reads so much more effectively on the other end when you just take what's already there and amplify it.
Yeah, I love that. Uncover. I love that.
Yes.
That's the first time I've heard that, and I just, uncover your truth. Oh, I love it. That just, if nothing else, I heard it today. That is just a light bulb moment. I think that is amazing. Uncover yourself. Yeah, because I think we do that. There's so much of that that we. And it's only now that you say it, I'm sort of thinking, even I'm thinking of myself, going, right, okay. But I get that. I think that is, that's an incredible way. And I think it's so true, because I think we do need to uncover, because as you say, there is so much good stuff there that we have that we're probably just not talking about.
Oh, and realizing that it's there too. So many people say, okay, well, that's easy for you to say, but I'm boring. And no, that's not true. Everyone has something interesting about them. Just ask your friends, ask your family. There's people, presumably, unless you're a total hermit or a real jerk, I don't know. But presumably, there are people who already can see the things in you that are special. So just kind of rock those out. And people also get in their own way, not only by thinking they're not special and that there's nothing interesting about them, but people also get in their own way because they're worried about appealing to everybody. And that is the surest way to be forgettable and bland. If you get that out of your head, you stop worrying about, appealing to everybody and start just focusing on being yourself and making sure that you're someone who you can look in the eye. And as long as you can look yourself in the mirror and like yourself, that is going to create a far more, human way of showing up that other people are going to resonate with a lot more. Other people are going to be able to tell, this is a real person. And the right people are going to resonate with that. The right people are going to relate to that. And that won't be everybody, but that's fine, because the people who love you will really love you. And that's what you really need. It's not quantity, it's quality. You want to make sure that the right people just love you to death, as opposed to more people technically knowing who you are, but sort of being forgettable and not making a real impression and not getting beyond that surface level.
Yeah, and I think it goes back to the saying, you get more of what you focus on, and I suppose it's, as well as that, it's the law of attraction as well. When you put it out there, it will come back to you. And I've seen that time and time again, even in some of the pieces that I've wrote. I've gone, wow, I didn't realise I had such an impact. That had such an impact on people. And it's when you have them conversations that you start to see it opens up so many more doors. It makes more people aware of what you're doing and the benefits and the, what problems you're solving and what you're bringing to the table. And then they go, it, as you say, law of attraction, it comes straight back at you.
It does.
Yeah, it is. It's fascinating. I was looking at your website, and obviously you're branded all over the place, and I just love. it's another thing that I wanted to touch on was this when you're on Twitter. I just love, especially when we're like I would always be on the Twitter Smarter chat, your own one, the Agora Pulse one as well. And like that, it's just every time you tweet something, there's a GIF with it. Where do you come up with these GIFs? It's unbelievable.
It's really funny because the GIFs did not start out as a marketing thing. It was just fun because I had some friends who had them. But then once I started putting them out there and using them more, and especially once I started expanding my presence on Twitter, it just became something that people pointed out and that they knew me for. And so I said, okay, well, this is something that's catching on. I've got to double down on this. And I already liked using GIFs. I feel like it just adds so much color and personality. Some people think it's unprofessional, but again, I mean, my personality is kind of fun and silly and colorful, so I'm fine with that. So I already noticed that I was using other people's GIFs. And I said, you know what? How about instead of using other people's GIFs, I just make my own? Especially since I'd heard that there are also, this is a little bit less of it, but I've heard that there are also some kind of cultural appropriation issues with, certain communities having GIFs used to signify certain things and sort of people saying, okay, so instead of using, for example, like Black television personalities, instead of using them to communicate some sort of attitude that you think this communicates, how about I express my own attitude? How about I express my own personality? How about I use my own face and my own image to communicate things? There is an advantage to using, GIFs from TV and movies and things like that, simply because it's a cultural shorthand. Other people can relate to whatever mood you're trying to convey because it's already something that's out there and that they relate to. But I have found just as much success with people just relating to expressions that I put out there, expressions on my own face, expressions on my own captions. And it's also become a very recognizable thing. I'm actually about to redo all of my GIFs simply because since it wasn't originally a marketing tool, there are two things that I wish I'd done and that I'm going to go back and do now. One of them is that I'm very controlling about my color, my shade of red. My shade of red is a specific shade of red that I use on all my materials. And my backdrop, it's real. It's not a color I've popped in. It's an actual curtain behind me. So especially if it's not lit right, it's not the exact shade of red. So I'm going to reshoot them with a green screen so that I can pop in my actual shade of red back there and it can really be on brand. But in addition to that, I've got a public Giphy account now. I'm a Giphy brand account, which means that I can be found in search. So literally tens of millions of people are out there using my GIFs. I can see the stats on Giphy, and they have no idea that it's me. There's no way for them to tie it back to me because my name, my Twitter handle, they're nowhere. I'm just some random woman on a red background. So I'm going to redo all my GIFs on a green screen so I've got the proper shade of red. And I'm also going to add a watermark of, my name or my Twitter handle or something like that so that these millions of impressions actually become my millions of impressions. And the one thing people have asked me about that is they've said, oh, but what if someone uses one of your GIFs for something you don't support? And that's happened already.
Yeah.
But I don't feel like people at all connect the two. I don't feel like if I use a GIF of Pam from The Office saying, yup, I don't think anyone thinks that the actress is actually endorsing what I've said with the GIF. I don't feel like people make that connection. I think people know that GIFs are just out there on the internet. So I don't think that people are going to think that, use of my GIF means I'm endorsing something. It's not really how it works. So I'm not concerned about that so much. But I do think that I need to put those to work for me more. Since they have turned out, accidentally to be a good marketing tool, I might as well take what's working and, as I said with the other things, turn it up to 11.
I agree totally. I think they're incredible. And I first started using them. I seen Madeleine Skillard using them a couple of years back, and I just said, right, I'm going to have to do a few of these, because she put one out. She waved that she does the wave one or whatever, and I says, I'm going to have to do one, because I was at the time, especially with some of the Twitter chats, I was coming in from Ireland, so there were people who were saying, "Oh, where are you from?" and whatever. So I literally created a GIF with "Made in Ireland" or "Hi from Ireland" or whatever, something, and it was a really, really simple GIF. I remember actually sitting here in the office doing it and going, "Okay, I'll just put these out and see how they're." I couldn't believe the amount of traction that I got on it, and the retweets on it saying, "Hi from Ireland." And they were retweeting me, but it was also showing me up in other places that I'd never been before, especially on and I went, hold on here, there's something a lot more to this than actually just putting out a funny picture of you saying hi or whatever. So I
drew a map.
Yeah,
I drew a map because, as you pointed out, I guest on a lot of Twitter chats, but I host my own Twitter chat as well. Chat about brand on Tuesdays. But whenever I'm on and someone says, "Tell us where you are," I'm in New York, but I'm not in New York City. So explaining exactly where I was, that took a bit of doing. And so I finally took a whiteboard. I drew a map of the state of New York. I labeled where New York City is, and I labeled where my town, Nyack, New York, is. And so now I have a GIF of me sort of presenting it like Vanna White, like Nyack, New York. My friend George makes fun of me for that. He always says it like that. He's like, Nyack, New York, because that's how he hears people hear your GIF in your head.
They do,
in their heads.
They do.
So I use that, and if you go on the GIF search and you type in Nyack, Nyack, that's what you're going to find. You're going to find mine, because people aren't making GIFs of my town. So it's my job.
Yeah, and I think it's great. And I did want to bring that up. But it is. I think it's, especially I suppose when we look at personal branding and we look at branding in the wider scheme of things, I think it's very important that we have our own voices. And I know definitely for yourself, you promote that on a regular basis, and in fact probably all the time is to have your own voice and to be who you are, and I suppose, as you say, it's about telling the stories just a little bit better online. I think that's probably the big key to it.
Yes, absolutely.
Yeah, I think that, and it's, especially I suppose with the personal branding, I know for a while I did, and we spoke before the podcast, before we came on air, about that Compass Media, that's Alan Hennessy, but people didn't see me. So I think I had to do, and I've done it last year a bit, and I know I'm going to be working on it a little bit more as well this year, is to be a bit more front facing. But it's it's not about, a lot of people say that too, and they say, I don't want to be in people's faces all the time. But look, why are we using social media? Why are we online?
Yes.
Why are we out there? But why do we have a website? It's for branding. It's to tell people what you do. So I think it's very important. But I think there is a level where you shouldn't cross, or where you should cross, and I think that can be very important as well.
Well, a couple things to keep in mind. First of all, by putting Alan out there and not just being Compass Media, Alan becomes something bigger than Compass Media. If you decide to do something besides Compass Media someday, as I said before, I'm on my 4th career here. People change things all the time. There could be something that comes out next year that we can't even predict that becomes the next big thing that we want to pursue. And not being tied down to one thing is one of the great advantages of being out there as a personal brand, because you can take that anywhere you go. And another thing to keep in mind is that we are the only people who see 100% of our content. So it feels like you're shouting off the rooftops. It feels like you're in everybody's face, but that's only because you're seeing all of it. Most people are not. Maybe 10% is cutting through. So that's the other thing to keep in mind. If you feel like it's too much, keep in mind that nobody is seeing everything.
Yeah.
So you need to sort of be a little louder to cut through that noise. And yet another thing is, keep in mind, what are you putting out there? If you're putting out something of value, it's not a problem. People don't get sick of benefiting. If what you're putting out there all the time is buy my thing, and what you're putting out there all the time is just an old-fashioned kind of broadcast marketing advertising message, then yes, people are going to get sick of that, and they're going to tune it out, and they're going to unfollow you, so they won't be seeing it anyway.
Yeah.
But if what you're putting out there is actually bringing value to people's lives, and if what you're putting out there is actually interesting to people, and what you're putting out there is personal enough that people start to get to feel like they know you, then you know what? They're not going to get sick of it. It's going to be fine. And if they do get sick of it, believe me, you'll find out, just because you won't have an audience for it. But that's generally not because people put themselves out there too much. It's generally because people are putting themselves out there in the wrong way, or putting the wrong things out there, which is to say, not showing up to serve.
I had that it was early last year. The previous year, I spoke to people and they says, "Oh yeah, well, it's Compass Media," and Compass. And through the training over, I suppose, the last year or so, and especially online, I've been able to, I suppose, let people know and help people to understand that more. So now what I have is like, I spoke with, I think it was Mark Schaefer a couple of months back, and we actually were speaking about this in particular, and he was saying, well, Compass Media is the brand and it's the business that supplies all your clients and stuff like that. But it happened to be, I was talking about something else that I did, and he says, I never knew you did that. And he says, and that's what people need to know, that even though there is the Compass Media brand, there's also the Alan Hennessy brand, because the Alan Hennessy brand does a lot more than what just Compass Media does. So I think for business owners, you know, especially for, I suppose, personal business, entrepreneurs and people like that, that they should be thinking about that it's, you know, if they have started a company, that you can, there's never a time where you can't say, oh, well, I can't go and do a personal website. And that's exactly what I did. And now I get more people interacting with me through the personal brand than I do through the company one. But the company one does what it does on the tin. It promotes the business, but the other one promotes me. So I think it's very important. So, and that was a bit of a revelation. It was a bit of a hard thing to do as well, for someone who's, you know, you don't want to be saying, oh, well, look at this lad, he thinks he's great. When you actually go, no, people want to know about that, and so you can
Why
put it out there.
shouldn't he think he's great? That's the other thing. Why shouldn't he think he's great? Be your own client.
Yeah.
Would you ever say about a client, oh, look at them, they think they're so great? No, you're all about how to make them look great.
Exactly.
So be your own client.
Yeah, so I think there's a lot of benefit. I sort of rambled on a bit there about that, but however, I think it's important though as well to say. I suppose your 3 top tips for personal branding before we finish up, what would they be?
Well, I'll echo some of what I said before. The first thing is the stuff that you're inclined to hide in order to fit in is the stuff you need to not hide in order to be memorable. Another thing is, who are you to say that you're boring and not interesting? You know, you're interesting to somebody. You're interesting to the right person. So don't worry so much about that, and just be yourself, because it'll latch on to somebody. It'll latch on to the right person. And then the other thing is, again, just keeping in mind that you're the only person who sees 100% of your content. So put more out there than you think makes sense, as long as it has value, or, you know, don't put as much out there, but put fewer, stronger things out there. Whatever it is, just bear in mind, nobody is seeing all of it. It's okay.
Brilliant stuff. And the final question that I ask my guests at the end of every podcast is, if you had the chance to invite someone to dinner, whether it be past or present, who would it be and why?
This is such an uncreative answer, but the truest answer is, honest to God, I haven't been able to sit down for a meal with my parents in a year nearly. They're still with us, thank God. Of course, we're going through the pandemic, and I don't remember the last time I was able to sit down to dinner with my parents from less than 10 feet away. And so for me, honestly, I would love to just be able to sit around a table with my parents again at a normal distance, eating our food without masks. I just want to have dinner with my parents, and we're not doing it because we want to keep each other safe, and I stand by it, and I'm glad that we are, but I really hope that 2021 sees me able to have dinner with my parents again.
Yeah, and I think that's going to be a running theme of this season of the podcast as well, that people will say that, because I know from last year we had some fantastic people that they said they'd love to meet, but I think
of course celebrities, people who are long dead, of all the incredible people in the universe, my answer would have been very different a year ago. As wonderful as my parents are, they're certainly wonderful people, but my answer would have been a little bit higher reaching, not people I've had dinner with literally thousands of times before, but now that's who I would like to be around a table with.
Yeah, and I think that's and I think it's opened up. I think it's made people a lot more aware of the most important things in their lives, and I think that has I suppose been one of the great things that has come out of the pandemic. I know we've always had them, but I think
we take it for granted.
It's accentuated it more so than ever, and I think that's going to be very, very important, especially for 2021. And who doesn't want a hug? Who doesn't want that? It's only when stuff goes away you sort of go, oh my God, what happened? All I want to do is, like, I spoke to a friend of mine the other day, and like that, it was, oh, how are you? And we were tipping shoulders, and I go, I can't do that. I can't even, because it just didn't matter. Anyway, we'll say no more, but we long for the day that we can do it again, and we will. There's no doubt.
We will.
Christine, how can people reach out if they want to get in contact with you?
Well, I am the only Christine Gritmon, which is nice. So you can look me up, Christine Gritmon, grit like when something is gritty, and mun like Monday. And I'm at Gritmon.com. I'm C. Gritmon on Twitter and on Instagram. I'm Christine Gritmon Inc. on Facebook. On LinkedIn, I'm Christine Gritmon, and I'm also Christine Gritmon Inc. I'm on YouTube, Christine Gritmon Inc. I'm in a whole bunch of places.
Brilliant stuff. And
just not Parler. Not on Parler.
Well, not for much longer anyway, but let's just put it that way. Anyway, and of course, don't forget, you also have your Chat About Branding Twitter chat, which happens every Tuesday at noon, and also your Let's Talk About Brand Facebook Live every Friday at noon as well. So do check them out. They are always full of great content and always great fun as well. There's some great interactions as well. Christine, it's been an absolute pleasure to sit and chat with you today, and we're so honoured that you took the time out to come on the social media podcast with us today. It's been a blast. Thank
you so much for having me, Alan, and it's been great to actually get to have a conversation together. It's been wonderful.
Brilliant stuff. So we wish you continued success in the future, and we will talk to you soon.
Thanks.
Hey, thanks for joining us today on the Social Media Talks podcast, and hopefully you learned some great information and also insights from our guests today. And if you'd like to listen to any of our previous podcasts, you can log on to our website at compassmedia.ie/podcasts. And all of our podcasts are available on all the usual podcast providers. And we would be delighted if you would leave us a rating and review on Apple Podcasts, as we're always thrilled to receive your feedback on any of the programs. You can also subscribe to the podcast there so you never miss an episode as well. And if you'd like the show notes for this episode or for any of the previous episodes, please log on to our website at compassmedia.ie/show notes. And if you'd like to be a guest on the podcast, please do get in contact with us. All you have to do is email us at smtalks@compassmedia.ie. And if you'd like to find out more about the services that Compass Media provide, from social media marketing and training to podcast services, please visit our website for more details. You can can also reach out and connect with me across all of the social networks, including Facebook, Twitter, LinkedIn, Instagram, and I will personally answer every one of your requests. That's about all for today. I've been Alan Hennessy from Compass Media for the Social Media Talks podcast, and we look forward to talking to you next week. And as I always say, be social. So until next week at the same time, bye-bye.
Social Media Talks podcast is a production from compassmedia.ie.
The Social Media Talks podcast is sponsored by ContentCal. For more information, visit their website at contentcal.io. We would also like to remind you the Social Media Talks podcast is proudly supported by charityradio.ie.